Thank you everyone for coming again. One of the things that we want to clarify today, we really dove into the meat of what it is to create a strong video, as in some of the elements that are necessary to envision a strong video. But today I want to talk about a couple different things. Number one, I want to talk about purpose, and number two, I want to talk about production. And so basically, uh, when we talk about the purpose of planning a video, we're talking about, okay, what is the underlying motive behind the content we want to produce? And what is the underlying motive behind why we want to produce that content? And so obviously, we're part of a SDA organization. We want to be able to create content that reflects us and then obviously positively reflects the Lord. Now, there's not much teaching that you can do on that, but the point is that we want to produce quality videos because we want our audience to see that we offer up quality in what we do, both to those that we serve in this earth and also the Lord. So in terms of the reason for videos, the reason why we put stock in making good videos is because that's the way in which people will perceive the things that we represent. And if you have content about, say, sports, and you have very bad, it's not professional at all, no one's going to be like, wow, that's a sport I really want to play. So the same thing is true. When you're creating videos, you want to be able to create proper reflections of the things that you want to represent. So creating a video for the sake of content, we often think, well, if it's good content, people will watch it. And that's not true. Content is only as good as the things that you put around. So if you want to make sure that your audience has a message passed on to them, you need to make sure that you have good enough content for it to merit them being interested. So last week we talked about different ways that we could engage our audience. I'm going to briefly touch on that again. So we said we need to target the needs of our audience. What are the needs of our audience? Our audience needs things that are in relation to the content of the video, not just all their needs. A video won't address their need for food, but maybe I can address a video on how to create good and healthy food. That would be the need, targeting the needs of my audience. And so my content should reflect particular needs. And typically you want to have one or two things that really hook your audience to be like, I need this in my life. You need instant engagement. All right. You can have the greatest thought ever, but if you spend an hour and a half lecturing your audience on that, they're not going to listen. It does not matter who is presenting. You can be the greatest speaker in the world, but you need to engage with your audience in such a way that when they take a look at the very first portion of your video, they go, aha, I think I will sit through the rest of this. So engagement is important. And once again, as we live in a modern era, people's attention spans go down and down. So the time space that you have to instantly engage them, that decreases as well. So that's why we must stress that, okay, quality videos, it's more complex than just putting the video together. It's more complex than simply having the vision. It's about how do the elements work together to be attractive to the audience. We also talked about strong supporting elements. We gave examples in the last one, such as, okay, how does audio influence the video that comes on screen? And we looked at cases where audio perhaps is more important than the visual. And typically our other senses are actually perhaps more attuned. They're more ingrained in our subconscious. If you could find a way to pass smell through a video, that would like change life, right? People would be like, wow, my olfactory senses are really going off here. So videos can only convey certain elements, but the ones that they do convey, we want to use all of them. And finally, we talked about proper emphasis and dialogue, the way that the elements of our video interact together. So actors, when they're acting, the dialogue needs to be crisp, clean, it needs to make sense, it needs to convey more than just the words to the audience. The same is true for the elements in our video. Now, when I'm on a Zoom call like this, I can't really coordinate the elements. I'm not interacting with the background behind me. The background's not saying anything about my face. In fact, it's actually akin to, a very loose video production. So that's why we have the PowerPoint, because if you guys just stared at this all day and you heard me talk, it would do nothing for you. Be like, okay, I've got this guy talking. Maybe he sounds decently interesting. He got a haircut on Friday. I guess he looks okay. But then I've got all these jumbled elements in the background. There's nothing here to make the audience go, aha, I want to stay. And the best we can do for this is, throw across a PowerPoint. All right, we're going to throw across a PowerPoint because that's the best way to get the information we need to the audience. But now instantly you can see as the PowerPoint comes back on, it's a better level of production. So all of these elements together basically turns our vision into a solid production of a video. But the vision that you have to create a solid production of a video, that too is limited. And the bulk of the time that we're going to spend talking here today, we'll be talking about those different elements. So element number one that we're going to talk about. Oh, well, first let's go over our production actually. So the key is to engaging our audience with our production, which is the general element of what we're talking. We need to talk about layout. What is layout? Layout is how the video is perceived by the audience, all right? So it's, for example, when we talk about a user interface, when we talk about computers, you need a user interface that's very easier to interact with. Is your video something that's easy for your audience to interact with? And how can it interact with it? If you just have one thing on screen, if you're filming something and you're talking over it, but they can't see you, it's actually less interactive. It's less complex. Sure, it's simpler, and we said simpler is better, but at the same time, there's less reasons for your audience to engage. So layout is important because it tells the audience instantly what elements on screen they can interact with. For example, dialogue elements, such as what are they reading that's coming across the screen? What are they listening to that's coming from behind the screen? What are they seeing on the video interact with each other? So layout is important. Also, consistency. We're going to really touch on these other elements today. We did talk a bit about layout last time. Consistency in format. Is your audio consistent? Is your video consistent in terms of quality? So we took a look at some newsreels. And actually, if we have time, maybe take a look at it again today. But obviously, I piled up a few examples in the last version of this, and you guys can go ahead and check that out. In fact, this is just meant to be more of a follow-up to the last video. We looked at consistency in the way that, for example, news productions run things. Even though it's very different when they're in the studio, filming all the things to be like, okay, and now the weather report. Even though that's different quality than when they're out there on the street doing journalism and taking, notes from people, you can see that they allow for a distinct break in audio quality and video quality. So the key in consistency is that you do not constantly shift. And we're going to talk about that soon. Well, there's also importance to lighting. So not changing things up to the audience, at least keeping it at a consistent level. This is important. The same is true of lighting. As you can see, when we go back to my face, the lighting constantly shifts and changes because I'm moving around and I don't have a way for me to look dynamic in the lighting. So what it does is it functionally changes the way in which the quality of my little box here looks, because the lighting is constantly affected. And your audience's eyes have to constantly adjust when they see bad lighting or unmixed lighting as compared to really good clean lighting. Just like you would want to get good lighting for a picture, you want good lighting for a video, because that's literally just a series of pictures. So strong lighting is also important. We talked about clarity in sound. We talked about the importance of good audio. But remember, you can have good audio and not necessarily clear audio. And these are different things that you can see will be very important going forward. And finally, smooth and steady camera motions. I am not a cameraman. I cannot talk to how you would create that. I know we have a cameraman, and we can talk a little bit about that later together. But what we do not have, while I do not have the ability to go ahead and talk to you guys about the particular ways in which we can create strong camera work, I can't talk to you about what you would need in order to create a good production with your camera. So if you have your camera just shaking all about like this, if I'm walking while I'm talking, doesn't do much. No one's going to be like, okay, I'm going to sit through 15 minutes of this. So there are certain elements where you can use that, but it's important to remember that the majority of the time you want your camera motions to line up with what's being presented in your content. And camera motions, that functions for everything. That's why video games look so clean. I mean, even if you're just filming something where, oh, I don't have to buy a camera, it's still camera work in terms of what is coming on the screen, as in the footage that you're looping into the video that you're trying to integrate all of these elements into. So let's first talk about being consistent with your audience, in terms of these particular elements. Being consistent with your audience. So when our audience first perceives our video, they are going to be interested by the elements that come on screen. If I see a really nice video come on screen, a really nice intro, a really nice beginning, a hook, then I'm like, okay, this is not only the quality that they're presenting at the beginning of the video, I can expect that they will produce at this quality for the rest of the video. So when you begin your video with strong audio or strong video, they're expecting you to maintain that quality. Now, if you begin your video with bad audio and bad video, it just looks bad and they're not going to be hooked and they might not come back. But sure, you can maybe get great audio and video later. But at that point, they're just confused as to, well, okay, you started off with this stuff that didn't look so good. I don't know why I'm still watching, but now that I am, why didn't you start off with this nice stuff? So it's important to just stay consistent with the audience, because your audience is going to start to notice these elements. And once they start to notice these differences, their mind instantly leaves thinking about, oh, this is good content. You want your audience to focus on your content. If at some point your audience starts going, oh, look at that shoddy camera work, you've lost them. They're not thinking about how good your video it is anymore. They're not thinking about what the quality is behind your video. They're just thinking about, oh wow, that's bad camera work. Voiceovers in movies, it's the same thing. We have this idea that audio and video are super different elements in terms of how it's perceived by the viewer or the listener. It's really not. Same thing is true of podcasts, everything that we've said. If you have a nice sounding intro for a podcast and then you have bad sounding content, it's not going to work. So we want our video quality and our audio quality to stay tip top for the entire video, or at least as good as you can get it, because the audience will notice those differences. So being consistent with your audience is important. And now I haven't developed a slide for the next point, and this is in terms of what audience notices, but I'm just going to go ahead and play the video, and you can tell me, what do you think you notice about it? So we're going to go ahead and play a video. I apologize to my buddy Ilyash. This is the most clear example I can find. I love you, buddy. So we're going to take a look at a video where actually we have different elements pretty well mixed together, but there's something that the audience can probably notice, which might throw off the point of the video. Hold on, audio, let me share my audio. Bad video production right now. My bad. 1 second. Optimize for video clip, show sound. There you go. All right, take a look at this.
Hello everyone, welcome to my video editing masterclass for beginners. Over the next couple sessions, we will be learning the basics of video editing that will allow you to import videos, audio, and photos into a timeline, cohesively edit them, and then export them in a universally recognized standard. In short, edit together a video yourself. We will learn the basic professional terms used when editing videos, and together build the foundations of what I hope is a very rewarding experience for you all. What we learn will be applicable for many different video editing programs, but to limit cost, we will use a free program called HitFilm Express, which can be found at the link below. To join this class, just fill out the Google form at the link below, download HitFilm Express, and make sure that you come to class. You can also contact us at sdamasterclass@gmail.com for more details. I hope to see you all there.
All right. Thank you so much, Ilyash, for, well, I guess I did not ask you in this particular one, but I know that you are more than happy to help us out when we do these things. So basically, what did we notice about that video? Does anybody have any thoughts? I mean, to me, the audio was well mixed. The video.
Yeah, it
was
seemed
well mixed.
pretty consistent throughout.
Sorry, go ahead.
It seemed pretty consistent throughout.
Sure. And it was consistent throughout. Was there anything, though, that might have thrown off the quality of the video?
If like there were a bunch of distracting things or like the audio was bad.
No, the audio was pretty clean. The elements he incorporated didn't take too much of the screen. Let's take a look. Let's take a look. All right, let's take a look. And now I know this is basically looking for this. I'm not going to play any of the audio. Just look at the video. What is off? As soon as I mention it, you guys are going to see it for the rest of the time that he's talking. Look at his eyes. Does his eyes look like they're directed at the camera? Josh, are you there? What do you think?
Yes. No, they are not directed at the camera. I was wondering where you were going with this, but yeah, this makes sense.
Right.
Yeah, they're not looking at the camera because there wasn't a way for me to have the script directly in front of the camera without blocking the view of what the camera is seeing.
Right. And look at my eyes. I mean, in the Zoom video, look at my eyes. You can see that, hey, my face, you know, I'm clearly not looking at the camera. Right now, I'm looking at the screen. All right. So this is a difficulty that really only comes up when you start to get all of these other elements together. But you could see that with Josh, he currently didn't have the equipment necessary in order to be like, okay, I have this clear looking at the camera. This looks good, et cetera, et cetera. And now I'm not saying that this video was bad. It was a good video. But as you can see, if the even one element is off, someone starts to watch it, especially if you're doing a bigger production, if you start to watch it, you can see how the audience is noticing that difference. They feel that the audio is engaging them, the video is engaging them. They look at Ilyash, he's symmetrical on screen. He's looking at them. Oh, wait, no, he's not. And that just throws off the rest of the video. Now, don't get me wrong. Is it going to serve Ilyash's purpose for sending out to, you know, the couple hundred people that are at North Shore? Sure. But one of the things that I know Josh did was him and whoever punk he decides to work with in that studio decided to purchase a teleprompter, because that allows a difference in audio in video quality. So instantly, the audience will always notice the eyes. So especially when you're attempting to do vlogs, this is important. Finding a way to make sure your audience knows that you're looking at them, it's important. If they start to see that your eyes aren't looking at them, it feels uncomfortable. If I look here, if I look above the screen, it would feel super uncomfortable for the rest of you guys. So the point being is that you want to make the video as seamless and as smooth as possible. And the way in which you do that is just have sometimes these other elements which allow you to do that. For example, lighting. This is another element that your audience will notice, even though it's not about being consistent, it's more about just generally having good lighting. Even though it's not so much about, oh, is your audio or video quality going to change? If you just in general don't have things like, okay, I'm looking at the camera, if I'm not engaging the camera that way, if I don't have good lighting, I'm also misplacing how I engage with the camera. So in this particular notes that I have for this, Um, Audiences notice. Audiences always know when something is off. Everyone is a critic, and they're the audience. I guess they're allowed to kind of be a critic. So an audience will see when there's a weird shadow or there's discoloration. That's why people use makeup in front of the camera. It's not because people are vain. That's not why you have good lighting in video. A lot of people think, oh, well, this is, if you really cared about a good video, then it's not going to be about these other ways that it looks. Video is all about presentation. Video is all about what comes in front of the camera. If you don't have a consistent, a clean looking shot, then no one is going to be focused on what the shot is about. They'll be focuses on the flaws in the shot. So this is exactly why you want to have strong lighting. You want to present in front of the camera well. Occasionally you will use something like makeup. It's so that actually the focus of the video can remain on the shot. If I am shooting actors, I don't want my audience looking at them and going, wow, this is a bad budget production. You can see that all these flaws in his face. And you also don't want them going, oh, wow, I can, see all the elements where they tried to make them look better. It's important to maintain a balance. It has to look natural, right? And so this is why, it can be something where you want to make sure that you're using something like makeup and such, especially when you're presenting professionally. So this is why it's important to think about, okay, how in the world am I going to make it look? How in the world am I going to make the shot look like it's lit well? And it's all about balance. And I'm going to have Ilyash talk to us really briefly about balance. And actually, we're going to use, let's see, actually, you know what? Do I want to use this shot? I don't know if I have a better shot. I don't know if he has a better video currently up. Sure. Is this one? Am I looking at the video in this one? I guess I'm looking at the video on this one. Ilyash, can you go ahead and talk to us what's required for good and proper lighting?
All right, so lighting is kind of special and specific. With this video, if you look at it, you can see that the lighting is pretty even. There's not many shadows that are casted on Nate's face. It's okay to have a little bit of shadow underneath his chin, because that's kind of where, if you think about it, if the sun is beaming down on you, you're going to have a shadow underneath you. So that looks more natural than having something from underneath and everything is lit. That's kind of weird. Like this, you don't really want that. That looks very odd. So um, the so the idea here is that this is working pretty well, but the thing is, we also lit the background. That's something that you can do. You don't necessarily have to do that. Nate, I'm going to share my screen because I have
Go ahead.
a diagram over here. And this diagram is it's talking about what's called 3-point lighting. Okay, as you can see over here, there's the camera right here. So the camera generally, in the case of these type of videos, will be centered. And then you've got the key light, which is essentially your main light, the light that's supposed to kind of emulate or pretend to be the sun coming down on you. So that's your main light, the one that is, casting the main focus on your face. There is the secondary light, which is called the fill light, and that one kind of fills in the rest of it so that you don't have a very sharp shadow on your face. Say, for example, the key light came from here, you're going to have a very dark other side of the face. So the fill light will make it more even, but still slightly shadowed. Okay. And then you'll have the third light in a 3-point lighting setup is your backlight. Okay. And the backlight is special because you can kind of do a lot of different things with it. You can either shine the light directly behind the person to have kind of a hair light on them, which is, that's fine. You can shine it directly on the wall behind them to brighten up the wall, or you can have a little fun with this. And if you are in a larger room, you can put like a lamp or even like fairy lights or whatever you want in the background, way behind the subject, which is the person you're filming. And it'll cause like a very nice kind of like a warm feel to it, because the light is in the background. You can kind of see like, oh, you're part of that set or part of that place, and it kind of like enhances it in a way. So it really depends on what you're trying to do, but mainly you need two main lights. And if you can get the third light for like a backlight so that you can, it's especially helpful to have a backlight so you can create a definition between the background and the person. Okay, so that it's not like you are just one piece. Uh, like it's not just like a flat picture. You can kind of see that there's a difference between you and the background. Um, so, but you can work with two lights, but it's best to work with three in a stationary setup. So yeah,
Okay,
that's
and
pretty much that for that.
I also noticed that there's a difference in terms of the amount of light that goes from the key light to the fill light and the backlight. Could you talk
Yeah,
about why that's important?
it can be the case. I wouldn't necessarily exactly follow what this diagram is saying. That's not always the case. It really depends on what you're doing, but generally it is true. Your backlight should be um, dimmer than your key light because your key light is your main light, the one that's supposed to be shining on your face. Um, it also really depends on what kind of lights you're using. It depends on how bright they are. So like if you kind of need 100% brightness on everything, it kind of makes sense. It also depends on the distance that you have the lights placed from the subject. So if you
Mhm.
have something, two lights that are both at 100%, which you should be fine, you probably want your fill light to be slightly farther away so it gets a more, um, it fills in most of the subject. And thus, because it's farther, it kind of gets dimmer anyway. So you don't
Mhm.
really need to lower the brightness. So
Got it.
it a lot of people have lights that you can't change the brightness, you can't dim them, you can't make them brighter. So a way to kind of fix that is just by moving it farther away or focusing it if you want it to be brighter. So like maybe getting some like black foil and curving it around the light source so that it kind of beams the light straight as opposed to being very um, what's it called, like diffused is what they call
Mhm.
it. Or you can if it's already very strong uh, and forward, you can get something like uh, this is like a super cheap way to do it, but you can get like cling wrap, not cling wrap, like the one that's kind of like milky looking. It's kind of opaque. That
Mhm.
one works pretty well because if you kind of keep it a little bit away from the light, it'll diffuse it because it has a lot of bumps on it. It kind of makes it more a softer light rather than a very directed light.
Got
So
it.
there are things you can do to kind of mess around with what you have, but two lights is good. Changing the distance is great. Focusing versus diffusing, which is unfocusing the light. Mess around with that and see what you get.
Awesome. Thanks, Ilyash. So really quickly, could I ask, let's talk about the setup that you decided to use in North Shore. How much would you recommend for doing something in terms of, say, what a semi-professional or to professional studio like North Shores would want to be? What is the cost for a
Cost.
light like that?
Cost for a lighting thing. We found something that was pretty good. It was relatively cheap. It came with three lights, and it was about 250 bucks. That's a pretty cheap but reasonable amount for something like that. You can get like lights individually or whatever, and these are not even the best lights, but they work for what we need because we have such a small area. If you're in a larger place, those lights aren't going to do much because they're small lights, and they are very diffused lights, as in they have a very wide um, range of how they project light, as opposed to being very focused. And focused lights are normally more expensive. So it depends on what you're doing and where you are. But at North Shore, it works for what we have. Three lights is fine. 250 bucks. That was pretty good deal. Um, yeah.
All right, absolutely. And would that be what would the light be in the professional studio, like a new studio where everything needs to be absolutely perfect? I assume those lights would be even more expensive because you're working with a
Yeah,
wider
I was
space.
actually looking into that recently, and those type of lights are generally about $500 each on the cheap
Wow.
end. Individual lights, and those are spotlights. Those are ones that are very, very focused. You can also change them, like you put like a filter on top of it, and it'll make it wider. But that's not really what they're used for. They're normally spotlights. They would focus directly on the subject. They're generally used. I mean, yes, news stations use them, but I think like the more obvious choice would be like a musician on stage. They
Uh,
would have a bunch of lights on a rig and they would be focused on the instruments and the people playing, and that's where you can kind of see, wow, there you go, that's what this is focused on. And those are not necessarily like huge um, spotlights like you would see at like a play or like a concert or something, where you just have
Mhm.
this giant thing that is shining all the way down from somewhere else. This like these are much smaller. They're like, you know, maybe this size, but they're very powerful and very focused that you can do with that. And this is not even talking about RGB lights or red, green, blue lights, ones that you can mix different colors and mess around with. Those are generally less
I
focused
see.
and harder to be very bright because they're LEDs, and also um, they're just much smaller. So you can mess around with that, but it is a little bit harder. So that's a separate thing. If you want extra like color besides just what is blasted on their face, like white or warm colored light, um, you can get RGB lights, which is they need to be much closer to the subject and be pushed a little bit brighter. Generally, they create like a good ambience. They work really well with like fog machines. It's kind of it's pretty cool stuff. So
Awesome. Thank you, Eliash, so much. So another thing I wanted to notice in terms of the way that the audience focuses on this video here is you can see that the background is not as sharp and as clear as the face of the central individual. And that's also important because if the background was like super clear, then the focus would be on that. So that's another thing. That's not quite lighting. That has to do more with balance. But that's the way in which you're going to have focus on the central individual. Eliash, could you also tell us about a good quality camera? What does a good quality camera need, and how much might that run you? Not because cost is the most important thing, but just for people who are thinking, well, maybe I want to start something really professional of my own. How would they go about that? What camera quality should they look for?
well, you have to first think about what you are able to edit on your computer at home. Um, if you are able, if you have a good computer, you
Mhm.
might be able to work with 4K footage, which is the higher resolution footage. Um, and if you can work with that, it's better to get something that has at least 4K capability so that you have more flexibility after the fact. However, if you can't, 1080 is fine. Most videos are exported in 1080 anyway,
Mhm.
and you'll have a lot of room to work with there. But 1080 is a lot less taxing on a computer system when you're editing. Um, that like taxing, as in like it would take you less time to edit because it actually runs right.
Mhm.
Um, Now I work with 4K footage. I like using that because 4K is 4 times larger than 1080p. It has 4 times more data, meaning that I can zoom in and move it around wherever I want without actually physically moving and zooming in live while we're recording. So I have the whole flexibility after the fact to do all that stuff.
Got it.
Um, so that's why I like using 4K, and that's kind of my mindset going into that. I mean, there right now there's 6K and 8K available. My workflow at home, my computer can't handle that, so I'm not even going to think about going into that. Also, the
Mhm.
cameras are way more expensive, but I mean, it's stuff to think about, right? So basically, if you're going to go into something like this, you're going to need a camera that's either 1080 um,
Okay.
or 4K capable. You don't really want to have something that max is like HD, which is 720p. That's old. You don't need that anymore. You might export a video in 720. That's fine, but like recording something higher, export down. It just makes even something recorded in 4K, exported in 720 looks way better than something recorded in 720. Okay. It'll just be much more detailed, even though it is technically still 720. It has a higher bit rate, meaning that the like I don't know if you noticed, but you can watch like a Zoom call like right now, and technically all of our videos are in 1080p, but they're not that good quality compared to how other like YouTube videos can be in 1080. You know what I mean? So like there's that's what's called a different bit rate or different like quality within a quality. It's weird.
Mhm.
But generally the higher the bit rate, so like at the very least, like 4K would be like 100 megabits per second of a write speed. You want to look for something at the very least of that. If it's even more, that's even better. Um, Now, if you want to do um, a lot of like run and gun stuff, as in like, okay, you grab your camera and vlog or quickly view something, um, you can use something that use a camera that has interchangeable lenses, but it might be even easier for you just to use your 4K capable phone. or it might be easier for you to get a point and shoot camera, as in one that doesn't have a removable lens. It just might be quicker and easier for you. Now, I like using things that have removable lenses because I have a few lenses that I can swap and change depending on what I need.
Right.
There's this thing
Right.
called focal length, where basically the smaller the number, the wider the angle is of view. So if I have something on my camera that's 10 millimeters focal length, I have basically a 160-degree view, I think. So it's a pretty wide view, allows me to see a lot in the room, makes the room look pretty large too. Those type of views are really nice for landscapes, because then you can just see everything and it's beautiful, you know. Now a more tight or telephoto type of lens would be something like a 210 millimeter or 400 millimeter. You know, as you can see, the number goes up, the more zoomed in it is, right?
Yeah.
So that allows me to, for example, if I was at the back of the church, I could zoom in and be able to see someone up close as if I was right there, you know. What we use in our studio is a 30 millimeter, particularly because I can go into this. It's a lot of complicated stuff, but basically our cameras are what is considered a crop sensor camera, or APS-C. That means that compared to a full frame, which are generally more expensive, and that's the one that they actually measure the millimeters on, it is 1.5 times more cropped than a full frame camera. Okay, so if on a full frame camera I had a 50 millimeter, if I take that same lens and put it on an APS-C camera, and it would look like an 85 millimeter. Okay, so the reason why I'm saying this is because 50 millimeters on a full frame is generally considered what it looks like for a person to view from their own eyes. Okay,
Okay.
so if I'm trying to convert that to APS-C, which is a type that we use, 30 millimeters times 1.5 equals roughly 50 millimeters. So that's what it would look like to us. If I sat where the camera was and I looked at Nate, it would roughly look how the camera is viewing the video. Okay, and generally for things like that, you want it to look as natural and as, you know, as as natural as possible, just so that people feel like they're part of everything, you know. There are
Right.
different like focal lengths, like say for example, if I'm really far and it zooms in a lot, uh the footage gets compressed, not compressed as in like you lose data, but like your background and foreground get more compressed together, so as if they look like more together. So um
I actually have that
your
example
face
up
and
right
yeah.
here with the
Exactly.
church. As you can see, this camera is not super close to Pastor Burnett, but
hmm
because I mean, it's a good quality camera, you can still make out his face clearly. However, the background isn't so distinguished from his face as in the studio, where you could see that an individual can have really clear on the face and be really, you know, the background is just kind of in the back there. You can't really make out anything in the back.
That also has to do specifically with depth of field. And if I'm willing to bet that if we zoomed in a little bit more on this footage right here, like live, if we physically
Mm-hmm.
zoomed in with the camera, the background would become more blurry than Pastor Burnett was.
Okay.
So basically, the idea here is, I don't want to go super detailed into this because it's a whole different thing, but
Oh, for sure.
there is what's called the exposure triangle. And the exposure triangle it consists of shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. Okay, shutter speed is how fast your camera is capturing the images quickly. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so generally, if you're recording in something like 24 frames per second, you want to double that and do about 50, a 1/50th shutter speed. That means it captures an image roughly one time every 50th of a second.
Got
Okay.
it.
Um, and so it'll do that consistently. You want it to just double it, just so that things don't get choppy, or it's not ultra smooth, because you kind of want things to look realistic. Sometimes you want it ultra smooth, and that's fine to change it, but generally you want to keep it realistic. Um, with like motion blur and stuff like that. Aperture is the main one that connects to what I was trying to say here. Okay. The wider the aperture, the shallower the depth of field. As in, say for example, I'm sitting right here, and let me see, does this work? No, it doesn't work for this camera, but you can have something in the foreground, which is me, right? And then because of the wider depth of field, or the wider aperture, the background becomes blurrier. Okay, but with the same camera, I can raise the aperture. They're called f-stops. So like the biggest aperture is the smaller number. It's kind of weird, but say for example, a 1.4 aperture means you have a very shallow depth of field, and that's the widest or brightest you can get with that lens. Okay, now if you collapse the aperture and make it smaller, such as f22, which is way smaller than f 1.4, you can actually have the person in front and the stuff in the background all in focus at the same time. Okay, so it just really depends on what you're trying to do. But the thing is, when you zoom in, so when you have a longer focal length, something that might be like, say for example, if you zoomed all the way out and you were at like 12 millimeters or something, something with a focal length, I mean not focal length, sorry, with an aperture of like f4, that normally, sorry, something that would have had an aperture of like f1.4, that would have been blurry. If you zoomed in, f4 would look the same as f1.4 because of how much compression there is. So it would look very blurry in the background. I don't know if I'm making sense, but it's
No,
kind of
basically, the point that I'm getting here is that depending on the type of camera you have, and depending in particular on the camera lens, there are different things that you can do with it. And so it can be a heavy investment into cameras and in lighting if you want to produce a professional level video. And actually, as you can note, I mean, we have pretty solid cameras in the studio. When we were filming this, we have pretty solid lighting. But because of the way in which this video has to be streamed, that adds an extra level of, hey, maybe this video wouldn't be so clean is if we did it, if we produced it later down the line. And this is a live stream video I'm showing right now. The person, the presenter here, he looks clean, but obviously it doesn't seem like everything's perfectly like aligned and focused. Can you talk about the difference between a streamed and a non-streamed video really briefly?
Yeah, like I said before, it goes back to bitrate. So it's about how much data is pushed in a second. Okay, so yes, this is 1080 technically, right? These cameras were not recording, but like streaming in 1080, and it was great looking and everything on my end, right? But when they go through the internet, you need to be able to transmit the video and audio instantly so that the contestants also can see everything, and they have to transmit all their data instantly so we can see everything, right? And because of all that transmission that has to be done live, and there can't be any delay because delays would make everyone confused, because of that it has to get compressed, and by compressing something you lose a lot of data except what is essential. So basically what you end up with, Nate, if you can go back a little bit to where Elias is on the screen.
No problem.
Yeah, and just pause it there. If you can see, things that are not moving so much look a lot better than the things that would be moving. So if you look at the background behind Elias, that is kind of stationary. The background looks pretty decent. It looks kind of how I expected it to look. But Elias, since he's moving around, the host, you can see that there's artifacting at the edges of his face. You can see that every time he moves, it kind of has to like re-update. Nate, right at the beginning of this video, where you're on the screen, you can see a big version of right after this. That's right there. Look behind you. No, move back a couple seconds. Okay, now just let it play out. Now pause it. I completely transitioned from the slide into Nate's face, but because of artifacting and the slow bit rate and all this stuff, look, you can still see the logo behind Nate, even though that wasn't there physically. Yeah. Okay. So that is kind of one of the problems that you run into with instant streaming, as in like Zoom type calls or anything like that. If we were streaming with a delay, we would be able to have the computer to process everything and make things look a lot better, and it would look clear and everything would be great. The problem is if we're streaming instantly for contestants to see, that's kind of a problem. when it comes to video. And even if we play the audio, which we're not going to do right
No.
now, but the audio also sounds compressed. It sounds like a radio talk show host, you know what I mean? Which is, it kind of worked out for us. Luckily,
Thanks for mentioning the differences in video. I do want to move and briefly talk about
Mhm.
audio. And you can talk about good quality mics too, but actually I wanted to kind of say that this particular video, it was the same thing. You can have good quality equipment, and
Yeah.
because of it's compressed. Let's just play the video here really briefly.
Hey there, everybody. I'm Nathan Velez. I'm the youth department leader here at North Shore SDA Church. We are so excited to bring this 600, where Jesus healed a man who had been paralyzed for 38 years.
I can hear
After Jason.
I can hear the compression there, right? I can hear that it's just not perfect. Can you talk a little bit about good quality audio, and then also why, same thing again, why isn't it perfect over the stream?
Right. I mean, good quality audio generally is something that is clear. It doesn't have any background noise. Doesn't have any like weird frequencies. If you were listening to this, I don't know if you noticed there was a really high frequency. I'm not sure where that was coming from. I think it was to do with one of our cables. So I messed around with it, and eventually by the end of the stream, it was gone. So I was able to figure it out. But with my EQ to kind of lower that one frequency that was bothering everyone. But a good mic can go a long way in anything. Like this mic right here is not that good, but I really don't care because this is not like I'm doing for voiceovers or anything like that. So it is what it is. A good mic like this one, which is the one that like he used yesterday, I have hanging up here, is this one is, it's a very nice mic. This is one that's very similar to one that they used for vocals on Michael Jackson's Thriller. So like things like that, if you invest a little bit in something like a good microphone, it can go a long way. And the thing is, here's why I say that. You could have the worst video, like worst, I mean, you might have a good video, but I mean like worst visuals ever. But if you have good audio, people will still stay to listen to it. Okay. The problem is if you have great visuals, it looks amazing, but the audio is terrible, it's trash, they won't stay for it because it bothers people too much. It's a subconscious thing. They'll see something and they'll be like, I'm not here because it's too much, it's bad, you know? So I would personally invest in making your audio sound great first before you make your video sound great, video look great.
Yeah, and I actually think there's a psychological element to this, and I want to briefly touch on the fact that everyone listens to high quality produced music all the time nowadays, right? If I was living, say, 40, 50 years ago, if I had a Walkman, right, then maybe it wouldn't bother me so much if the audio was bad and the video was great. I mean, stellar, right? But because I live in this era where I'm constantly listening to clean audio, I'm used to seeing a lot of HD stuff. So if I see something HD and then suddenly all the audio is bad, it's gonna bother me. But I know a computer is a computer screen. If the maybe video isn't as high quality, as long as I get that audio, I agree. I think we're more inclined as an audience to be like, okay, let me listen to this. I'm okay with this. And basically the last point that we want to leave you here with is in terms of the quality that you have, every single video, every single piece of audio has limitations. Even though there are things that are super professional, I mean, we have not yet reached the limit of how nicely we can make things sound. Until we get a literal virtual reality, there will be limitations to the audio and the video quality that we have. The point is that your audio and video quality are going to be limited by the equipment you have. And you can find workarounds. There are workarounds, but at the same time, the point being is that, look, if you want to create a high quality video and release that, you have to think about your audience. And if your audience is looking for higher quality audio, higher quality video, you're not going to be able to get that without some level of investment into the proper resources and equipment.
I personally would recommend that if you're going to start making videos yourself, use your phone. Okay, use a good phone. Make sure that you set the resolution that you're recording in. Make sure you take a look at it and make sure it's set to what you want it to be. If you're if your computer can handle 4K and your phone can record in 4K, put it at 4K 60 or 4K 30. You know, use something like that just to make sure you have the best possible. Remember, don't record up and down or portrait mode. Record in landscape mode unless you're doing a TikTok or Snapchat.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
fine to go up and down. Don't go sideways on those. But if you're recording for something else, such as like an announcement for church or whatever it might be, record in landscape mode. Make sure it's the highest quality it can be. And also remember, and here's a big thing, you can actually get external microphones for your phone. Okay. They can also be like professional microphones that you can rig to put on your phone. Like if you want good audio, there are ways to do that even with your phone. You don't need to get an expensive camera to do that. You just take your phone
Nice.
and plug
Yeah.
it in, and there it is, you know. So look into that a little bit. One thing that I recommend that could work really well, depending on what you're trying to do, is the Rode Wireless Go or Rode Wireless Go 2. Those work pretty well with phones. You can mess around with it. Basically, you can have your phone across the room, and then as long as you have the lapel right here, which you would clip on, um, it'll allow you to be heard even all the way across the room if you wanted to. And you can get started making videos with your phone with good audio. So yeah.
Thanks so much, Ilyash. Really appreciate some of the anecdotals that you offered. As you can see, you know, there's different levels of experience that you gain with it. I myself don't have as much experience using some of these hardware things, but I know that they're necessary. And I appreciate that I'm able to work with an excellent producer such as yourself, Ilyash. We are now going to take questions. We've come really to the end of what we can present and teach. As we've said in our last video and in this video, the number one thing to focus on is what is your audience seeing? How are they going to be engaged by it? Are there any questions that anybody has for us now that we finished up this kind of lecture portion of the video? Okay, well, everybody, thank you so much. We will go ahead and just finish our recording here then. This has been our North Shore video planning masterclass. And we look forward to seeing some of the videos that you're able to produce with both now your new skills found in being able to envision your video and being able to create your video after you filmed it. So thank you, everybody, for coming to our series. We really appreciate your support, and we'll see you guys later.
Yeah, my videos have been getting better now. So thank you for this class.
Thank you. I
I'm
appreciate
glad
the
for
support.
that. I'm glad for that. If you need any help, please let us know. We're always here to help and give feedback and constructive criticism, because it's always good to, you know, bounce ideas off of people and learn together.